The lights on the bridge of the New Horizon flickered as another strange signal came through the communication array. Captain Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the glowing screen that showed nothing but static and weird patterns. He had been in space for 15 years, exploring the outer edges of human territory, but he had never seen anything like this before. Commander Lisa Grant walked over to his chair, holding a datapad in her hands. Her face looked worried as she stared at the readings. She was the ship's diplomatic officer, trained to handle first contact situations, but this was different from anything they had prepared for. The signal was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and clearly not human. Danny Rodriguez crawled out from under the main console, wiping grease from his hands. As the chief engineer, he had been working for 3 hours to clean up the signal and make it understandable. His tools were scattered across the floor, and sweat dripped from his forehead. The communication array had never been designed to handle signals like this, but Danny was good at making things work that shouldn't work. Jake stood up and stretched his back. The New Horizon was a small exploration ship with a crew of 42 people. They had been mapping star systems beyond the Kepler region for 8 months, looking for planets that humans could settle on. It was quiet work, mostly boring, until today. Today, everything changed. Lisa tapped her datapad and the main screen came alive with symbols and patterns that hurt to look at. The shapes moved and twisted, forming letters that looked almost familiar, but not quite right. Slowly, the alien writing changed into English words. Though the grammar was strange and formal, the message read, "Attention, primitive species of the third planet of the star you call Sol, you are hereby commanded to cease all expansion beyond your birth system. The Galactic Council has become aware of your existence and your unauthorized movement into space that belongs to others. You will submit to evaluation and accept your place in the cosmic order." Jake read the message twice, then looked at Lisa. She was frowning at her datapad, probably trying to figure out what kind of diplomatic response would be appropriate. Danny had stopped working and was staring at the screen with his mouth open. The bridge was very quiet except for the gentle hum of the life support systems. The message continued. Your species will prepare for inspection by authorized council representatives. All military vessels will be surrendered. All colonial expansion will halt immediately. Failure to comply will result in enforcement action. The Council speaks for 847 member species across this galaxy. Your compliance is not optional. Jake sat back down in his captain's chair and started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh or a funny laugh. It was the kind of laugh that came when something was so ridiculous that you couldn't believe it was real. Lisa and Danny looked at him like he had lost his mind, which maybe he had. Navigation Officer Kelly Barnes turned around from her station near the front of the bridge. She was young, maybe 25, with short red hair and the kind of confidence that came from being really good at her job. She had been plotting their next jump to a system with 3 potentially habitable planets, but now she was listening to the alien message with a confused expression. Kelly spoke first. "Captain, are they serious? They want us to just stop exploring space because they said so?" Jake wiped tears from his eyes and tried to stop laughing. "Apparently. Kelly, some alien council we've never heard of thinks they own the galaxy and we need their permission to leave our solar system." Danny stood up and brushed dust off his uniform. "How did they even find us? We're way out here in the middle of nowhere and our signal broadcasts don't reach more than a few light years." Lisa was still studying her datapad, running analysis programs on the alien transmission. The signal came from the direction of the galactic core. It's incredibly powerful, broadcast on multiple frequencies simultaneously. They've got technology that's significantly more advanced than ours, at least in communications. The message kept playing, adding more details about the Galactic Council and their authority. They mentioned something called the Cosmic Order Doctrine, and listed the names of dozens of alien species that had already submitted to their rule. The voice that read the message was artificial, translated by computer, but it carried a tone of absolute certainty that these aliens expected to be obeyed. Jake stood up again and walked to the main view screen. Looking out at the stars, somewhere Out there, aliens who had never met humans were demanding that humanity give up its dreams of exploring the galaxy. They wanted humans to stay locked in their own solar system like prisoners, accepting whatever scraps of freedom the Council decided to give them. The captain thought about Earth, about the billions of people who looked up at the night sky and dreamed of traveling to other worlds. He thought about the colonies that were already being built on Mars and Europa, about the generation ships that were being constructed in the asteroid belt. He thought about all the explorers and scientists and dreamers who had spent their lives pushing humanity further into space. Then he thought about what his grandmother would have said to someone who tried to tell her what she could and couldn't do. She had been a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she had raised 6 children during the war and never backed down from anyone. She would have looked at these aliens and told them exactly where they could put their cosmic order doctrine. Jake turned back to his crew. Lisa was still analyzing the transmission, probably trying to figure out the best way to respond diplomatically. Danny was checking the communication array to make sure it was working properly. Kelly was looking at him, waiting for orders about their next destination. The captain walked over to the communication console and pressed the record button. The red light came on, indicating that his message would be broadcast back toward the source of the alien transmission. He cleared his throat and spoke in a calm, polite voice. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration vessel New Horizon. We received your message about joining your Galactic Council, and we appreciate you taking the time to contact us. However, we're going to have to decline your generous offer. Humanity will continue exploring space as we see fit. We don't need anyone's permission to travel among the stars. If you'd like to establish formal diplomatic relations, we're open to discussion, but we won't be submitting to anyone's authority. Have a nice day." He turned off the recording and looked at Kelly. "Plot a course for the Kepler 442 system. I want to see those 3 planets we detected last week." Kelly grinned and turned back to her navigation console. "Aye, Captain." ETA 4. Days at maximum warp. Lisa looked up from her datapad with wide eyes. "Jake, are you sure about this? They claim to represent hundreds of alien species. They might have weapons we can't imagine." Danny nodded in agreement. "Captain, maybe we should at least talk to Earth Command before we make any big decisions. This is first contact with an alien civilization. It's bigger than just our ship." Jake sat back down in his captain's chair and watched the stars on the view screen. Somewhere out there, aliens were probably having meetings about the strange humans who had just told the mighty Galactic Council to mind their own business. They were probably confused, maybe angry, definitely not used to being ignored. The captain smiled. His grandmother would have been proud. 3 months had passed since Captain Morrison sent his polite rejection to the Galactic Council, and the aliens were not happy about it. Admiral Patricia Walsh stood in the command center of Earth's newest space station, watching reports come in from human colonies across known space. The reports all said the same thing. Alien ships were watching them. The ships were big, angular things that looked like someone had tried to build a mountain in space. They didn't attack or communicate, they just sat there in the outer edges of star systems, scanning everything with beams of purple light. The colonists found it annoying more than frightening, like having nosy neighbors who stared over the fence all day. Admiral Walsh was a tall woman with gray hair who had spent 30 years in Earth's Space Navy. She had fought pirates, explored unknown systems, and dealt with every kind of crisis that space could throw at humanity. But she had never dealt with aliens before, especially aliens who seemed to think they owned the galaxy. Her aide, Lieutenant Commander Ben Carter, brought her another stack of reports. The aliens had placed monitoring stations near 12 human colonies and were sending automated messages every few hours. The messages were always the same: surrender now or face the consequences. The colonists were getting tired of hearing it. On the frontier world of New Austin, Governor Pete Campbell was having his own problems with alien interference. New Austin was a desert planet with good minerals and decent soil for farming. Pete had been working for 5 years to turn it into a proper human world. Complete with cities and farms and all the things that made life worth living, the Galactic Council had decided that New Austin was too close to something they called a restricted shipping lane and ordered the humans to abandon it. Pete's response had been to expand the main colony and start building a second city on the southern continent. If the aliens wanted the planet, they were welcome to come down and ask for it in person. Ruby Johnson was having her own encounter with Galactic Council authority. She was a freighter captain who hauled supplies between human colonies, flying an old cargo ship called the Lucky Strike. Ruby had been making supply runs for 15 years and knew every shortcut and safe harbor in human space. Today she was approaching the new Melbourne colony with a cargo hold full of medical supplies and farming equipment when 3 alien patrol ships moved to intercept her. The ships were twice the size of the Lucky Strike and covered in weapons that hummed with energy. They looked like they could turn her freighter into scrap metal without much effort. The lead alien ship broadcast a message in that same artificial voice that Captain Morrison had heard months earlier. Human vessel, you are ordered to halt for inspection. Your cargo and destination records will be reviewed for compliance with Galactic Council regulations. Prepare to be boarded? Ruby looked at the 3 alien ships on her scanner and shook her head. She had been flying cargo runs since she was 20 years old, and nobody had ever tried to board her ship without permission. She wasn't about to start now, especially not for some aliens who thought they could push humans around. She opened a communication channel to the alien ships and spoke in her most polite voice. This is Captain Johnson of the Lucky Strike. I'm carrying medical supplies to New Melbourne Colony. I don't have time for inspections, and I sure don't need your permission to deliver medicine to sick people. You can follow me if you want, but you're not boarding my ship. The alien commander seemed confused by her response. Human vessel, you do not understand. Compliance with Council authority is mandatory for all spacefaring species. Submit to inspection or face enforcement action. Ruby laughed and pushed her engines to full power. The Lucky Strike wasn't fast, but it was tough and reliable. She flew straight toward the alien formation, broadcasting Earth music on all frequencies. The song was an old rock anthem about freedom and rebellion, and Ruby sang along as she approached the alien ships. The aliens seemed to expect her to stop or turn away, but Ruby kept flying straight ahead. Her ship passed between 2 of the alien vessels, close enough that she could see their hull markings through her viewports. The aliens didn't fire or try to stop her. They just watched in apparent amazement as a human cargo ship ignored their blockade completely. Back on Earth, Dr. Amy Foster was studying everything humanity knew about the Galactic Council. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms, except until recently there hadn't been any alien life forms to study. Now she had communication records, ship scans, and behavioral reports from dozens of encounters. Dr. Foster worked in a small laboratory beneath the University of Chicago, surrounded by computers and analysis equipment. She spent her days trying to understand how the aliens thought and what made them different from humans. What she found was both fascinating and disturbing. Every species that the Galactic Council had contacted before humans had reacted in predictable ways. Some had fought and been defeated. Others had submitted immediately. A few had tried to negotiate but eventually accepted Council authority. None of them had simply ignored the Council and continued doing whatever they wanted. The aliens seemed genuinely confused by human behavior. Their messages were becoming more frequent and more demanding, but they weren't taking any real action. Dr. Foster suspected that humans represented something completely outside their experience, and they didn't know how to respond. President Carl Baker called an emergency session of the United Nations to discuss the alien situation. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in New York to decide humanity's official response to the Galactic Council's demands. The debate lasted for 3 days and covered everything from military preparedness to diplomatic protocol. Some delegates wanted to negotiate with the aliens and find some kind of compromise. Others believed humanity should prepare for war and start building more weapons. A few suggested that Earth should withdraw all its colonies and stay in the solar system until the situation became clearer. President Baker listened to all the arguments and then stood up to address the assembly. He was a big man with a calm voice who had spent his career dealing with difficult international situations. He looked around the room at the delegates from nearly 200 nations and spoke in simple, clear words. The way I see it, we have a choice to make. We can let some aliens we've never met tell us where we can and can't go in our own galaxy, or we can continue being human beings who make our own decisions about our own lives. I know what choice I'm making. The vote was not even close. Humanity would continue its expansion into space and would not submit to Galactic Council authority. The aliens could complain all they wanted, but humans would go where they pleased and do what they thought was right. The Galactic Council, meanwhile, was having its own meetings about the human problem. Chancellor Vexstar, the Council's supreme leader, could not understand why these primitive creatures refused to acknowledge superior authority. In 800 years of galactic governance, no species had ever simply ignored Council commands. Admiral Thomas's, the Council's military commander, suggested a demonstration of power to show humans the consequences of defiance. Perhaps if they destroyed an empty human outpost or disabled a few ships, the humans would realize their mistake and submit properly. Chancellor Vexstar approved the plan. It was time to teach these stubborn humans about the reality of galactic politics. Admiral Thomas's stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Stellar Dominance, watching the human colony of Haven's Rest grow larger on his main screen. His fleet of 27 warships hung in space like dark predators, their weapons charged and ready. Today, the Galactic Council would finally show these stubborn humans what happened when inferior species refused to obey their betters. The plan was simple and effective. The third moon of Haven's Rest appeared to be uninhabited, just a rocky ball of ice and minerals floating in space. They would destroy it completely, turning it into debris and dust. The humans would see the demonstration and finally understand that the Council's patience had limits. What Admiral Thomas's did not know was that the moon housed the largest mining operation in human space. 67 miners worked in tunnels deep beneath the surface, extracting rare metals that were essential for building faster-than-light engines. The operation was run by Tony Mitchell, a tough man who had spent 20 years digging valuable minerals out of hostile environments. Helen Murphy was the mining foreman, responsible for keeping the operation running smoothly and safely. She was in the main control room when the alien fleet appeared on their scanners, looking like angry storm clouds against the stars. Helen had dealt with pirates and equipment failures and cave-ins, but she had never seen anything quite like this. The mining crew gathered around the main communication console as Helen tried to contact the alien ships. Most of the miners were hard-working people who had come to the moon to make money and build better lives for their families. They were not soldiers or diplomats, just ordinary humans trying to do their jobs. Helen activated the communication system and spoke directly to the alien fleet. Her voice was calm and clear, like she was talking to workers who were about to make a dangerous mistake. This is Helen Murphy, foreman of Haven's Rest mining station. You're currently targeting an active mining facility with 67 civilian workers. I suggest you reconsider whatever you're planning to do. Admiral Thomas's received the transmission and felt a moment of confusion. His intelligence reports had indicated that the moon was uninhabited. The idea that humans might be working there had never occurred to him. But orders were orders, and the Council had decided that a demonstration was necessary. The alien admiral opened a channel to the mining station and spoke in his most threatening voice. Human workers, you have 30 minutes to evacuate your facility. This moon will be destroyed as a demonstration of Galactic Council power. Your species must learn the consequences of defying lawful authority. Helen listened to the ultimatum and felt her temper rising. She had been working in dangerous places for 15 years, and she was not about to let some alien bully destroy her operation and threaten her people. She looked around at the miners who were watching her with worried faces, waiting to see what she would do. The foreman activated the emergency communication system that connected directly to Earth Command. This is Haven's Rest mining station calling for immediate military assistance. We have hostile alien forces threatening to destroy our facility. We need help right now. Scott Davis, the station's chief engineer, was already working at his control panel. Scott was a creative man who could make almost anything work if he had enough time and spare parts. He had been modifying the mining lasers for months, partly for better efficiency and partly because he enjoyed tinkering with dangerous equipment. Nancy Turner, the communications officer, was sending messages to every human ship within range. Nancy had grown up on a farm on Earth and had come to space looking for adventure. She was good with communication equipment and had made friends with ship captains and colony governors throughout human space. The 30-minute deadline passed quickly. Admiral Thomases watched the countdown timer reach 0 and gave the order to fire. His fleet's main weapons lit up the darkness with beams of pure energy that could melt asteroids and crack planets. The attack was devastating and precise, designed to completely destroy the target, but Scott Davis had been busy during those 30 minutes. He had connected the mining lasers to the station's power grid and turned them into makeshift defense weapons. The lasers were not designed for combat, but they were powerful enough to cut through solid rock, which meant they could also cut through alien ship armor. When the alien fleet opened fire, Scott fired back. The mining lasers stabbed out from hidden positions on the moon's surface, finding weak spots in the alien ship's defenses. 3 of Admiral Thomas's vessels were badly damaged before they realized that the humans were shooting back with mining equipment. Nancy Turner had succeeded in calling for help. Admiral Walsh's task force dropped out of hyperspace just as the alien attack began, led by the carrier Enterprise's Dream and 6 escort ships. The human fleet was smaller than the alien force, but they had advantages that Admiral Thomas's had. Not expected. Captain Chris Lee commanded the destroyer Defiant Wind, a ship that had been designed for exploration and scientific research rather than combat. But Chris was a clever man who understood that any tool could become a weapon if you used it the right way. His ship carried mining, drones, and construction equipment that were supposed to help build colonies. The battle was unlike anything Admiral Thomas's had experienced in his long military career. Human ships moved in unpredictable patterns, using tactics that made no sense according to proper military doctrine. They fired weapons that should not have existed and used civilian equipment in ways that violated every rule of space combat. Lee launched his mining drones at an alien cruiser, programming them to attach to the enemy ship's hull and start drilling. The drones were designed to cut through asteroids, but alien armor was not much different from rock when you applied enough pressure in the right places. Admiral Walsh coordinated the human attack from her flagship, watching as her captains improvised solutions to problems that had never appeared in any military manual. Her crews were explorers and scientists and engineers who had learned to make do with whatever they had available. The alien fleet found itself fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting with damaged systems. Crews that should have surrendered kept finding new ways to cause trouble. Equipment that should not have worked as weapons somehow became deadly effective. Admiral Thomas's watched in growing horror as his superior fleet was systematically defeated by inferior human technology and impossible human tactics. His flagship's weapons officer reported that the enemy was using mining equipment, construction tools, and scientific instruments as improvised weapons. The battle ended when the last alien ships retreated into hyperspace, leaving behind wreckage and confusion. Admiral Thomas's had lost 11 ships and had no idea how the humans had defeated him so completely. His remaining vessels limped back toward Council space, carrying news that would shock the galactic government. Helen Murphy stood in the damaged control room of the mining station, looking at the debris field where alien ships had been destroyed. Around her, the miners were already talking about getting back to work and repairing the equipment that had been damaged in the attack. Tony Mitchell walked over to Helen and grinned. "Well, that was exciting. Think they'll be back?" Helen looked out at the stars where Admiral Walsh's ships were patrolling the system, making sure no more aliens showed up to cause trouble. The mining foreman shrugged and turned back to her work. "If they do come back, we'll be ready for them. Now let's See about getting those mining lasers back to normal operation. We've got quotas to meet. Chancellor Vextar sat in the council's great chamber, staring at the holographic display that showed the wreckage of Admiral Thos's fleet. The display rotated slowly in the air above the central platform, showing twisted metal and debris where proud warships had once been. Around the chamber, representatives of 847 alien species watched in stunned silence. The Chancellor was a tall, pale creature with 4 arms and eyes that glowed purple in the dim light. He had ruled the Galactic Council for 30 years, maintaining order and stability throughout known space. Never in his long career had he seen anything like the report that Admiral Thomas's had delivered. The Aquarian delegate bubbled nervously in her tank of blue-green water, sending streams of worried chemicals into the liquid. Her species had been among the first to join the Council, surrendering their independence without resistance when they realized how powerful the galactic government was. The idea that anyone could defeat Council forces was deeply disturbing to her. The crystalline representative stood motionless in his designated area, his silicon-based body calculating probabilities and tactical scenarios. His species communicated through mathematical formulas and logical equations, and the battle reports from Haven's Rest contained variables that did not fit any known patterns of behavior. Admiral Thomas's stood before the assembled council, his uniform torn and his pride badly wounded. He was a professional soldier who had conquered 12 star systems and brought dozens of species under council control. The defeat at Haven's Rest had shaken him more than any previous battle in his long military career. The admiral spoke in a tired voice that echoed through the great chamber. The humans fight like no species we have ever encountered. They use civilian equipment as weapons. They ignore proper military tactics. They continue fighting when logic dictates they should surrender. Our conventional strategies are ineffective against such irrational behavior. Chancellor Vextar processed this information with growing confusion. Every species the Council had ever encountered followed predictable patterns of warfare and diplomacy. They might resist initially, but they eventually recognized superior power and submitted to Council authority. The humans seemed to exist outside these normal patterns. Meanwhile, humanity was doing what it did best, ignoring authority and continuing with its own plans. President Baker stood in the Oval Office, signing authorization papers for Operation Open Door, the largest expansion program in human history. The plan called for establishing colonies in 50 new star systems within 2 years. The president looked up at his military advisors and spoke in his calm, steady voice. If the aliens want to play territorial games, we'll make sure they have plenty of territory to argue about. Every system we settle is one more place they'll have to patrol if they want to keep bothering us. Admiral Walsh had established permanent patrol routes through the disputed regions of space, using ships that were officially labeled as exploration vessels but carried enough weapons to discourage alien interference. Her crews were volunteers who had signed up for dangerous duty, knowing they might encounter hostile forces far from home. The colony ship New Frontier, commanded by Captain Roy Peterson, had just arrived at 3 new star systems simultaneously. The ship had been designed with modular sections that could separate and establish independent colonies, allowing humanity to spread across multiple worlds at once. Captain Peterson was a practical man who had spent 15 years transporting colonists to new worlds. He understood that the key to successful expansion was speed and efficiency. While the aliens were having meetings and debates, humans were building homes and farms and cities on planets that had never seen intelligent LIFE. Dr. Amy Foster had made a breakthrough in understanding alien psychology that would change everything. Working in her laboratory beneath the University of Chicago, she had analyzed thousands of hours of alien communications and behavioral data. What she discovered was both fascinating and encouraging. Dr. Foster published her findings in a report that was immediately classified and distributed to every human military commander and diplomat. The report explained that every council member species followed predictable patterns of submission to authority, resource competition, or territorial behavior. Humans combined all three patterns with something the Council had never encountered before. The report called it behavioral spite, the human tendency to do something specifically because someone else had told them not to do it. Dr. Foster's research showed that humans were the first species the Council had met that actually became more determined to resist when faced with threats and intimidation. The implications were staggering. If humans could resist Council authority, other species might realize they could do the same thing. The galactic government's power depended on the assumption that resistance was futile. If that assumption proved false, the entire system could collapse. The Council decided to try a different approach. Instead of military force, they would send cultural ambassadors to convince humans that joining the galactic community would be beneficial for everyone. These ambassadors would use logic and reason to show humans the advantages of cooperation. Ambassador Zethara of the diplomatic seraphim species arrived at Earth aboard a beautiful ship that looked like a work of art. The seraphim were elegant creatures with golden skin and voices like music, known throughout the galaxy for their persuasive abilities. If anyone could convince the stubborn humans to see reason, it would be Zethara. The ambassador requested a meeting with Earth's leading philosophers and scientists, expecting to encounter a primitive but teachable species. She had successfully negotiated with dozens of alien cultures and was confident that humans would eventually understand the benefits of Council membership. Dr. Nina Clark was a philosophy professor at Harvard University who specialized in ethics and political theory. She had spent her career studying questions of authority and self-determination, making her the perfect person to debate with an alien diplomat. The meeting took place in a conference room overlooking the campus, with representatives from several Earth governments in attendance. Ambassador Zethara spoke in her musical voice about the benefits of galactic civilization, advanced technology, cultural exchange, protection from hostile forces, and access to trade networks that span the galaxy. She painted a picture of humanity joining a peaceful community of species, working together for mutual benefit. Dr. Clark listened politely to the presentation, then asked a simple question that changed the entire conversation. That all sounds wonderful, Ambassador, but why do you get to be in charge of it? The question seemed to confuse Zethara, who had never been asked to justify Council authority before. She explained that the Council had been established to maintain order and prevent conflicts between species. Someone had to make decisions and enforce rules, or chaos would result. Dr. Clark nodded thoughtfully and asked another question. Has anyone ever asked the member species if they want the Council to make those decisions? Do they have any choice in how they're governed? Ambassador Zethara admitted that most species had simply accepted Council authority without question. The idea of asking for consent or allowing democratic participation was foreign to galactic politics. Governments ruled and citizens obeyed. That was the natural order of things. The philosophy professor smiled and leaned back in her chair. That's where we disagree, Ambassador. Humans believe that authority must be earned through consent of the governed. We don't mind galactic community, but we're not interested in galactic government unless we have a say in how it works. The meeting continued for hours, with Dr. Clark politely but firmly explaining human concepts of democracy, individual rights, and self-determination. Ambassador Zethara found herself defending political systems she had never questioned before, trying to explain why some species deserve to rule others. By the end of the meeting, Ambassador Zethara was more confused than when she had arrived. The humans were not primitive or unreasonable. They simply had completely different ideas about how civilized species should interact with each other. Their questions had no good answers within the framework of Council politics. The ambassador returned to her ship with a problem she had not expected. How could she convince humans to join a system they considered fundamentally unjust? And more importantly, what would happen if other species started asking the same questions that Dr. Clark had raised? Chancellor Vexstar received Ambassador Zethara's report and felt a cold fear settling in his chest. The humans were not just resisting Council authority, they were questioning the very foundations of galactic government. If their ideas spread to other species, the consequences could be catastrophic for everything the Council had built. 1 year after first contact, Chancellor Vextar stood in his private chambers looking out at the galactic capital, watching ships arrive and depart from the massive space station that served as the Council's headquarters. But something was wrong with the usual traffic patterns. Many of the ships belonged to species that were supposed to be loyal Council members, yet they were flying flags and symbols he had never seen before. The Chancellor's aide, a nervous creature called Kethmar, entered the chamber carrying reports that made the situation even worse. 17 member species had declared independence from the Council in the past 6 months. The hegemony of Voss had stopped paying their tribute taxes. The Trader Confederation had announced they would no longer accept Council regulations on their commercial activities. Most disturbing of all, these rebellious species were working together in something they called the Free Species Alliance. They had elected representatives, established trade agreements, and were sharing technology without Council oversight. It was everything the galactic government had been designed to prevent. Kethmar spoke in a whisper, as if saying the words too loudly might make the situation worse. Chancellor, we have received formal requests from 43 additional species asking for information about this human concept they call democracy. They want to know how governments can function without absolute authority. The Chancellor felt his 4 hearts beating rapidly as he processed this information. The human infection was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Species that had been loyal Council members for centuries were suddenly questioning systems of government that had maintained galactic peace for 800 years. Admiral Thomases entered the chamber without waiting for permission, his uniform clean, but his eyes still haunted by the defeat at Haven's Rest. The Admiral had spent months analyzing the battle, trying to understand how superior technology and greater numbers had lost to human improvisation and stubbornness. Admiral Thomases spoke with barely controlled frustration. Chancellor, our military forces are stretched beyond their limits. We have rebellion in the outer systems, piracy in the trade routes, and dozens of species refusing to acknowledge our authority. If we try to fight all of them at once, we will lose everything we have built. The situation was indeed worse than anyone had imagined. The Galactic Council's power had always depended on the assumption that resistance was futile and submission was inevitable. When humans proved that assumption wrong, they had opened a door that could never be closed again. Meanwhile, humanity continued expanding across the galaxy as if the Council's problems were none of their concern. Admiral Morrison, promoted from his exploration ship to command of the Free Species Defense Fleet, was preparing for humanity's most ambitious project yet, an expedition beyond the galactic rim to explore what lay in the darkness between galaxies. Ambassador Murphy, the former mining foreman who had discovered a talent for diplomacy, was hosting a conference on the human colony world of New Geneva. Representatives from 67 species had gathered to discuss forming a new kind of galactic government, one based on cooperation rather than domination. The conference room was filled with creatures of every imaginable shape and size, all united by their desire for self-determination. Some were former Council members who had declared independence. Others were species that the Council had never contacted, preferring to remain hidden rather than submit to alien authority. Ambassador Murphy stood at the podium, looking out at the diverse crowd of aliens who had come seeking an alternative to Council rule. She was still getting used to her role as a diplomat, but her practical experience as a mining foreman had taught her how to get different groups working together toward common goals. The ambassador spoke in simple, clear words that the translation devices could handle easily. The way we see it, there's room in this galaxy for everyone to make their own choices about how they want to live. We're not here to tell anyone what to do, but we're also not going to let anyone tell us what to do. The breaking point came when the Council's most loyal member species made an unexpected request. The devotees of order had served as the Council's police force for 3 centuries, enforcing laws and maintaining stability throughout known space. They were fanatically devoted to the concept of absolute authority and had never questioned a Council directive. High devotee Kalenth arrived at Earth aboard a diplomatic ship, requesting a meeting with President Baker, The devotee was a tall creature with silver skin and multiple eyes, bred specifically for loyalty and obedience. The idea that such a being would question authority was almost unthinkable. The meeting took place in the White House, with Earth's leading political scientists and philosophers in attendance. High Devotee Kalenth sat stiffly in a specially designed chair, clearly uncomfortable with the informal atmosphere of human government. The devotee spoke in a mechanical voice that showed no emotion. President Baker, my species has observed the changes occurring throughout the galaxy. We have served the Council faithfully for 300 years, maintaining order and preventing chaos. But we have questions about the system we serve. President Baker leaned back in his chair and smiled. What kind of questions, High Devotee? Kalenth struggled to find the right words for concepts that were foreign to his entire species. We wish to understand how humans maintain social order without absolute authority. How do you prevent chaos when no single entity controls all decisions? How do you achieve cooperation without compulsion? The president thought for a moment, then gave an answer that would be quoted across the galaxy for generations to come. We argue about everything, fight over details, and somehow muddle through. It's not efficient, but it's ours. The key is that everyone gets a say in the decisions that affect their lives. High Devotee Kalenth listened to this explanation with growing amazement. His species had been taught that democracy was impossible, that intelligent beings needed strong leadership to prevent them from destroying themselves. Yet humans had not only survived their chaotic system, they had thrived under it. The meeting lasted for hours, with President Baker and his advisors, explaining concepts like voting, representation, checks and balances, and individual rights. High Devotee Kalenth took detailed notes, asking questions about how such systems could possibly function without falling into anarchy. By the end of the meeting, the devotee had experienced something his species had never known: doubt about the systems they had served so faithfully. If humans could govern themselves successfully, perhaps other species could do the same thing. Chancellor Vexstar received High Devotee Kalenth's report with a sense of impending doom. If even the devotees of order were questioning council authority, the entire structure of galactic government was in danger of collapse. Something had to be done to restore stability before it was too late, but it was already too late. The ideas that humans had introduced to the galaxy could not be contained or controlled. Species that had never imagined alternatives to authoritarian rule were suddenly demanding the right to choose their own governments and determine their own futures. The solution came from an unexpected source. Former Chancellor Vexstar, now serving as Earth's first alien ambassador, suggested the establishment of a new Galactic Congress. This would be a democratic federation where species maintained their sovereignty while cooperating on matters of mutual interest. The proposal was radical by galactic standards but seemed reasonable to humans and their allies. Each species would elect representatives to the Congress, which would have the power to make decisions about trade, defense, and interspecies disputes. No single species or group would have absolute authority over the others. The transition was not smooth. Some council loyalists resisted the changes, leading to conflicts that lasted for months. But eventually the benefits of the new system became clear. Species that had been oppressed under council rule were free to develop their own cultures and technologies. Trade flourished as artificial restrictions were removed. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, preparing for humanity's first expedition beyond the galactic rim. His fleet consisted of ships from dozens of species, all united by curiosity about what lay in the darkness between galaxies. It was exactly the kind of cooperation that the old council had said was impossible without central authority. As the fleet prepared to jump into the unknown, Admiral Morrison received a message from a newly discovered species in the Andromeda Galaxy. They had detected the radio signals from the new Galactic Congress and wanted to know more about this thing called democracy. The Admiral smiled and opened a communication channel. This is Admiral Morrison of the Free Species Alliance. We'd be happy to tell you about democracy, but fair warning, once you understand it, You might not want to go back to whatever system you have now. Dr. Foster's final research report concluded that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was not their technology or military prowess, but their fundamental belief that authority must be earned rather than imposed. The galaxy had become a more interesting place when species learned they could simply say no to those who claimed to rule them. The universe, as humans had always suspected, was big enough for everyone to find their own way through it.